Before Noah built the ark, the earth had already become a place of violence. Genesis tells us that mysterious sons of God took human wives and that the Nephilim walked the earth. But one Enoch takes the story further. It describes watchers descending onto Mount Hermon, swearing an oath, sharing dangerous knowledge, and fathering giants whose violence consumed the land. This was the world that existed before the flood. But what happened there that made judgment inevitable?
Welcome to the 81 Scrolls.
But before the Watchers descended and before the giants appeared, humanity had already begun building a world where achievement and violence were growing side by side. The story begins outside Eden. According to Genesis, Cain and Abel brought offerings to God. Abel's offering was regarded with favor, while Cain's was not. Genesis does not fully explain why. Instead, it focuses on Cain's response. He became angry. God warned him that sin was waiting at the door, but that he must master it. Cain ignored the warning. He led Abel into the field and killed him. The first human death described in Scripture was not caused by age, disease, or accident. It came through one brother raising his hand against another. When God confronted Cain, the ground itself became a witness. Abel's blood was crying out from the soil. Violence had entered not only the human family, but humanity's relationship with the earth. Cain was driven away from the land he had worked, yet his story did not end in isolation. Genesis says that Cain built a city and named it after his son, Enoch. The text does not describe its size, architecture, or population, so we should not imagine a vast metropolis. But the detail matters. Human beings were no longer living only as scattered families. They were beginning to establish settlements, organize communities, and leave permanent marks on the landscape. Several generations later, Genesis introduces three descendants of Cain, whose names are connected with important areas of human life. Jabal is associated with those who lived in tents and raised livestock. Jubal is associated with musicians who played stringed instruments and pipes. Tubal-Cain is described as a worker or forger of bronze and iron tools. In only a few verses, Genesis gives us a brief picture of an emerging society, herders moving across the land, music being created, metal being shaped, and settlements being built. None of these activities is condemned by itself. Genesis does not say that raising animals, creating music, or working metal was evil. Human creativity remained part of the world outside Eden. But the same family record also preserves something darker. Lamech, a descendant of Cain, tells his wives that he has killed a man for wounding him. He then boasts that if Cain were avenged sevenfold, Lamech would be avenged 77-fold. Violence was no longer simply committed, it was celebrated. Lamech's words suggest a world in which retaliation had become a measure of personal power, where a small injury could be answered with death, and fear could be used to protect one man's honor. This is one of the central tensions in the world before the flood. Humanity was learning how to build, create, raise animals, make music, and shape metal. But these achievements did not heal the anger already present in the human heart. The problem was not civilization itself. The problem was that human ability was growing faster than human restraint. And this matters because the Watchers did not descend into an innocent world. According to Genesis, violence had already entered human life. What follows would not create that darkness from nothing. It would deepen a crisis already underway. Then Genesis turns from the descendants of Cain to the wider growth of humanity. People multiplied across the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them. At that moment, the text introduces a group it does not fully explain. They are called the sons of God. They saw the daughters of humanity, took wives from among them, and the Nephilim appeared upon the earth. In just 4 verses, Genesis opens one of the most debated mysteries in the entire pre-flood story. That is where the story now turns. Genesis has shown us a human world already marked by achievement, anger, and retaliation. Then, as the population grows, the narrative introduces another development, one so brief that it has raised questions for centuries. Genesis says that when human beings began to multiply and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the women were beautiful. They took wives for themselves from among those they chose. The passage does not identify these beings more precisely. It does not explain where they came from, why their actions were forbidden, or how their arrival changed the world. It simply calls them the sons of God. That expression appears elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible in passages that describe members of the heavenly court, especially in the Book of Job. For that reason, many ancient Jewish readers understood the figures in Genesis 6 as heavenly beings. But that has never been the only interpretation. Some later Jewish and Christian readers understood them as powerful human rulers who took women by force. Others interpreted them as men from the line of Seth marrying women from the line of Cain. These readings attempted to explain the passage without treating the sons of God as angels who entered human relationships. Genesis itself does not settle every question. What it does say is that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humanity and children were born to them. These children are described as mighty figures of ancient times, men of renown. Even here, caution is necessary. The Hebrew word Nephilim is often translated as giants, especially under the influence of ancient Greek and later interpretive traditions. But its precise meaning remains debated. Genesis also does not state their height, describe their appearance, or provide a detailed history of their lives. Nor is the grammar entirely free from uncertainty. The passage closely associates the Nephilim with the unions between the sons of God and human women, but it does not explain that relationship as directly as 1 Enoch later does. Then the biblical narrative moves on with remarkable speed. Immediately after these mysterious verses, Genesis says that God saw how great human wickedness had become on the earth. The inclination of the human heart was continually directed toward evil. The transition is important. Genesis does not allow humanity to place all responsibility on the mysterious beings. Whatever Genesis 6-1-4 means, the verses that follow focus directly on human conduct. The coming judgment concerns a world in which corruption and violence have spread through human life. Yet for ancient readers, the questions remained. Who were the sons of God? What had they done beyond taking human wives? What connection did their children have with the violence that followed? And why did this strange episode appear immediately before the account of the flood? One influential ancient answer survives in the Book of the Watchers, the opening major section of 1 Enoch. First, Enoch does not merely repeat Genesis, it expands those few verses into a much larger account. In its telling, the sons of God are heavenly watchers beings whose proper place was above, but who turned their attention toward the daughters of humanity. The Book of Jubilees preserves a related tradition. It says the Watchers had originally been sent to earth to instruct humanity in justice and uprightness, but they failed in that purpose, took human wives, and became part of the corruption they should have opposed. These are interpretations of the Genesis story preserved in ancient Jewish literature. They should not be presented as additional sentences secretly removed from Genesis, but they show how some ancient communities understood the unexplained crisis behind those 4 verses. And in 1 Enoch, the crisis did not begin everywhere at once. It began with a group of watchers facing a decision. Their leader feared that the others would abandon the plan and leave him to bear the guilt alone, so they made a collective promise, binding themselves to the same act and the same consequences. The location given for that oath was Mount Hermon. And once the oath had been made, the watchers began their descent. According to 1 Enoch, the decision was made by 200 watchers. The text identifies Shemihaza, whose name appears in several English spellings, as their leader. He understood that what they were considering carried consequences. His concern was that the others might withdraw, leaving him alone to answer for the act. The watchers responded by binding themselves together. First, Enoch says they swore an oath and placed themselves under mutual obligations not to abandon their plan. The text also names 20 leaders who stood over groups within the larger assembly, although the full list varies slightly across manuscripts and translations. Their agreement transformed individual desire into a collective act. First, Enoch places this oath on Mount Hermon. The book connects the name of the mountain with the binding oath made there. That explanation belongs to the ancient text itself. It is not evidence that the event can be independently reconstructed from archaeology. Yet within the story, the mountain serves a clear purpose. It is the place where hesitation ends. Before Hermon, the watchers are considering what they might do. After the oath, they have committed themselves to crossing a boundary they understood should remain in place. The text then says they descended, took wives for themselves, and began living with them. Each chose a woman, and the women became pregnant. First, Enoch does not present this as an innocent meeting between two communities. Its language emphasizes transgression and defilement. The watchers leave the heavenly order to which they belong and enter relationships that the narrative treats as forbidden. This matters because the central problem is larger than physical desire. The watchers abandon the responsibilities of their own place. They use their freedom and greater knowledge without accepting the limits placed upon them. And because they act together, their decision does not remain private. Its effects begin to spread through human society. Jubilees presents the tradition with a somewhat different emphasis. In its account, the watchers had originally been sent to earth to teach justice and upright conduct among humanity, but they saw human women, took wives, and produced children described as giants. That contrast makes their failure especially serious. Beings associated with instruction and order become participants in disorder. Those who should have encouraged righteousness instead contribute to the corruption already developing on earth. Genesis does not provide these names, numbers, or details. It does not mention Mount Hermon, Shemihaza, or a shared oath. Those elements come from 1 Enoch, while the Watcher's original teaching mission is emphasized in Jubilees. Keeping those sources separate allows us to see what each text is doing. Genesis gives us the mystery. First, Enoch turns that mystery into a story of deliberate rebellion. Jubilees presents it as the failure of beings who did not remain faithful to their assigned purpose. But the Watcher's descent was only the beginning. First, Enoch says they also began teaching their wives, and through them, humanity forms of knowledge that the text believed had been disclosed in the wrong way and for destructive purposes. This does not mean that every human skill came from the Watchers. Genesis had already associated animal husbandry, music, and metalworking with human communities before introducing the sons of God. Nor does 1 Enoch describe electricity, machinery, or a lost technological civilization. Its world remains an ancient one. The concern is not that human beings learned how to think or create. The concern is that knowledge connected with warfare, manipulation, enchantments, and reading signs in the heavens was placed into a world already struggling with violence and self-control. One figure becomes especially important in that development. His name is Asael, or Azazel in many translations. And according to 1 Enoch, the knowledge associated with him would leave marks not only on human society, but on the earth itself. First, Enoch associates Asael with knowledge that could reshape both human appearance and human conflict. In chapter 8, he teaches people to make swords, knives, shields, and protective armor. The text also connects him with the working of metals, bracelets, ornaments, precious stones, coloring substances, and the beautifying of the eyes. To a modern audience, these subjects may seem strangely mixed. Weapons appear beside jewelry, metalworking appears beside cosmetics. But within one Enoch, they share an underlying concern. Knowledge is being used to increase the human capacity for violence, display, competition, and deception. The text presents these teachings not as ordinary steps in cultural development, but as secrets disclosed by beings who had already violated the boundaries of their appointed place. Asael was not the only watcher associated with such instruction. First, Enoch connects Shemahaza with enchantments and the cutting of roots. Other watchers are linked with interpreting signs in the earth, observing the courses of the sun and moon, studying the stars, and reading various celestial or natural phenomena. The names and precise assignments differ among manuscripts and English translations. For that reason, it would be misleading to present one modern list as if every textual tradition preserved exactly the same spelling and arrangement. The broader pattern, however, remains clear. The Watchers disclose forms of knowledge that the book regards as dangerous in the circumstances in which they are given. That distinction matters. First, Enoch is not saying that every form of metalworking is evil. Genesis had already associated Tubal Cain with the forging of bronze and iron tools, nor does the text condemn every attempt to observe the sky. Other parts of 1 Enoch devote considerable attention to the ordered movements of the heavenly bodies. The problem is not simply that humanity learns. The problem is the source, purpose, and use of what is taught. Knowledge that might have served life becomes connected with weapons. Observation becomes tied to divination and manipulation. Beauty becomes entangled with seduction and social corruption as the ancient author understood it. These judgments belong to the moral world of 1 Enoch. They should be explained in their historical setting rather than turned into a modern condemnation of jewelry, cosmetics, science, or skilled craftsmanship. Most importantly, the book draws a direct line from the Watcher's teachings to the spread of wrongdoing. As weapons become available, human beings possess more effective means of harming one another. As enchantments and secret practices spread, the established order is further weakened. Knowledge has entered society without the wisdom or restraint needed to govern its use. The Watchers therefore do not create every human failing. Violence had already appeared with Cain and had been celebrated by Lamech, but their intervention intensifies what was already present. Humanity receives greater ability without becoming more righteous. And the consequences are not limited to human society. The unions between the Watchers and human women produce children. Genesis mentions mighty figures associated with the mysterious episode of the sons of God. First, Enoch makes the relationship explicit. The women give birth to giants. At first, the giants consume what human labor produces. But their appetite does not remain within the limits of what the earth and its people can provide. As resources fail, their hunger turns outward. The beings born from a boundary crossed on Mount Hermon begin to overwhelm the world around them. The dangerous knowledge of the Watchers had increased humanity's capacity for conflict. Now the giants would turn that conflict into a crisis affecting every form of life. First, Enoch does not describe the giants as protectors, teachers, or builders of a better world. It describes them through their appetite. The text says they consumed what human beings produced. As long as the land could provide for them, that burden fell on human communities. But eventually, people could no longer supply enough. At that point, the relationship changed. The giants turned against humanity, Their violence extended into the animal world and disrupted the order of life around them. The account grows increasingly severe, presenting a world in which living beings no longer remain within their proper relationships, but begin destroying one another. Jubilees preserves the same basic direction. The children born from the Watchers become sources of conflict, injustice, and bloodshed. Violence spreads until the earth is described as corrupt, and every creature has damaged the way it was meant to live. These accounts expand far beyond the brief statement in Genesis. Genesis 6 mentions the Nephilim and describes the children of the mysterious unions as mighty figures of ancient times, men of renown. It does not provide a full account of their behavior, their appearance, or their effect upon the earth. First, Enoch supplies that larger narrative by identifying the children of the Watchers as giants and placing their violence at the center of the pre-flood crisis. That does not remove every question. The relationship among the Hebrew word Nephilim, the mighty figures mentioned in Genesis, and the giants of one Enoch has been discussed for centuries. First, Enoch clearly reads the Genesis passage in this direction, but Genesis itself remains much shorter and less explicit. The ancient texts also do not give us a reliable physical description from which to reconstruct the giants with certainty. Some manuscript traditions preserve enormous measurements, but the numbers vary, and scholars have long recognized that the textual history is difficult. For that reason, their precise height should not be treated as an established fact. What matters most to the story is not their size. It is their power and the way they use it. The giants possess strength without restraint and appetite without responsibility. They consume what others have grown, overwhelm the people around them, and turn against the created world that sustains them. Their violence also exposes something deeper about the Watchers' rebellion. The decision made on Mount Hermon does not remain with the beings who made it. Its consequences pass into another generation and spread across the land. A boundary crossed in secret eventually becomes suffering experienced by everyone. Yet human beings are not portrayed as innocent spectators. First, Enoch says that people took part in the wrongdoing connected with the knowledge they had received. Genesis goes even further in emphasizing human responsibility. It says that God saw how great human wickedness had become and that the earth was filled with violence. The two accounts place different details in the foreground, but neither allows humanity to escape moral responsibility. The Watchers deepen the disorder. The giants spread destruction. Human beings continue choosing violence. By this point, the crisis has moved far beyond one family, one city, or one act of revenge. The whole land is affected. The earth that once received Abel's blood is now pictured as bearing witness against widespread bloodshed. First, Enoch gives that image a powerful voice. It says the earth brings an accusation against those who have acted lawlessly. Then the cry of those who have suffered rises toward heaven, asking that their cause be remembered. This is the turning point of the story. Until now, the movement has been downward. The Watchers descend, destructive knowledge spreads, and violence reaches deeper into creation. Now the direction changes. The cry rises from earth to heaven, and the heavenly beings who remain faithful look down upon a world covered in suffering. They see what Asael has taught, what the Watchers have done, and what their children have brought upon the land. The time for warning has passed. The time for judgment is beginning. But before that judgment reaches the Watchers, one human being must step forward, not as a warrior and not as a king, but as a messenger. His name is Enoch. Genesis introduces Enoch with only a few lines. He belongs to the line of Seth and is the father of Methuselah. He should not be confused with the earlier Enoch, the son of Cain, after whom Cain named his city. Genesis says that Enoch walked with God. Then he was no longer there because God took him. The passage offers no further explanation, but within ancient Jewish tradition, those brief words became the foundation for a much larger portrait. In 1 Enoch, he appears as the scribe of righteousness, a human being who receives visions, records what he sees, and carries messages between the heavenly realm and the rebellious watchers. His role becomes important only after the suffering on earth has been seen. First, Enoch describes faithful angels looking down and witnessing the bloodshed below. They hear the cries of those who have died and bring the condition of the earth before the Most High. The text names Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel among those who witness the crisis. Their appeal is not based merely on the breaking of a rule. They point to the suffering caused by the watchers, the violence of their children, and the knowledge Asael has spread among humanity. The response addresses each part of the crisis. Noah is to be warned so that he and his descendants can survive what is coming. Raphael is commanded to bind Asael, cast him into darkness, and confine him until the final judgment. Gabriel is directed against the children of the watchers, whose violence will finally turn back upon them. Michael is told to bind Shemi-Hazar and those who joined him. The judgment reflects the shape of their wrongdoing. Those who left their appointed place lose their freedom. Those who formed a shared oath now share its consequences. And the giants whose strength overwhelmed the earth are not allowed to establish an enduring rule over it. First Enoch then turns to Enoch himself. The watchers approach him and ask him to prepare a written petition on their behalf. They seek forgiveness and hope that their punishment might be withdrawn. There is a quiet reversal in this moment. The watchers had possessed knowledge and power beyond that of human beings. Yet after using those gifts irresponsibly, they now depend upon a human scribe to speak for them. Enoch writes their request and reads it before falling asleep. In the vision that follows, he is brought into the presence of divine majesty and receives the answer he must carry back. The petition will not be accepted. The explanation given in 1 Enoch is direct. The watchers were meant to intercede for humanity, not to ask humanity to intercede for them. They abandoned the heavenly order, entered forbidden unions, and disclosed mysteries that contributed to wrongdoing on earth. Enoch does not invent their sentence, and he does not have the authority to cancel it. He is the messenger who confirms it. The watchers will witness the destruction of their children. They will be separated from the freedom they once possessed and held for judgment. The future they tried to build on earth will not continue. This part of the story belongs to 1 Enoch, not to the Genesis account. Genesis does not describe the watchers asking Enoch for help, nor does it name the angels assigned to carry out their sentences. But Genesis and 1 Enoch meet at one central point. The violence covering the earth will not be permitted to continue indefinitely. Judgment is therefore presented not simply as an expression of anger, but as an answer to a world in which the vulnerable can no longer live safely and the created order is being consumed. Even so, the purpose is not the disappearance of all life. Alongside the sentences against the watchers and their children comes an instruction to preserve a future. The earth is to be healed, wrongdoing is to be brought to an end, and one household is to be warned before the waters arrive. Enoch delivers judgment to the watchers. But the next message concerns survival. A man described in Genesis as righteous in his generation is about to receive instructions for a task unlike anything he has faced before. That man is Noah. And while the world around him continues on its familiar course, he begins preparing for its final days. When Genesis turns to Noah, the tone of the story changes. The earth is described as corrupt in God's sight and filled with violence. Yet, within that same generation, Noah finds favor before God. Genesis calls him a righteous man. blameless among the people of his time, and says that he walked with God. That description does not mean Noah is presented as more powerful than everyone around him. He is not introduced as a king, warrior, or builder of cities. What distinguishes him is the direction of his life. While violence is spreading, Noah continues to walk with God. Genesis names his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Together with Noah's wife and the wives of his sons, they will become the human family carried through the coming judgment. God tells Noah that the earth has become filled with violence and that an end is coming. He is instructed to build an ark from a wood identified in Hebrew by the uncertain term gopher. The vessel is to be coated inside and outside with pitch and divided into compartments. Genesis gives its proportions: 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Because the precise length of the ancient cubit could vary, modern conversions should be treated as estimates. What matters in the narrative is the scale of the task and the care with which it is described. The ark is to have 3 levels, an opening near the top and a door in its side. It is not described as a sailing ship designed to travel toward a destination. Genesis mentions no sails, rudder, or means of navigation. Its purpose is preservation to keep human and animal life above the waters until the flood recedes. God also speaks of establishing a covenant with Noah. Noah is commanded to enter the ark with his household. He must bring animals with him and gather food for both his family and the creatures under his care. The text then gives one of its simplest but most important statements. Noah did everything. God commanded him. Genesis does not tell us how long each stage of construction took. It does not describe the conversations Noah had with his neighbors, nor does it say that crowds gathered to ridicule him while he worked. Those details may appear in later storytelling and artistic traditions, but they should not be inserted into Genesis as if the chapter recorded them. The biblical account remains focused on obedience and preparation. First, Enoch approaches this moment from within its judgment narrative. After the watchers and their children have brought corruption upon the earth, Noah is warned that destruction is approaching so that he and his descendants may be preserved. Jubilees retells the event within its carefully organized calendar. Like Genesis, it connects the flood with the corruption of the earth and presents Noah's family as the line through which life will continue. Each text tells the story in its own way. Genesis provides the fullest description of the ark and Noah's instructions. First, Enoch places his warning alongside the judgment of the watchers. Jubilees fits Noah and the flood into a larger, sacred chronology. Together, they present preservation as the other side of judgment. The violence covering the earth will be brought to an end, but the created world will not simply be abandoned. Human life, animal life, and the possibility of a renewed beginning are carried into the ark. Genesis says that Noah, his family, and the animals entered as commanded. Then the waters came. Rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. The waters rose, and the ark was lifted above the ground. The world of Cain's city, Jubal's music, Tubal-Cain's metalwork, the watcher's oath, and the giant's violence now passed beneath the waters. But the story of that world did not disappear with it. Genesis preserved the foundation. Ancient Jewish works such as 1 Enoch and Jubilees preserved wider interpretations of its mysteries. Fragments of those traditions survived in different languages and locations. Yet it was in Ethiopia that the complete forms of 1 Enoch and Jubilees continued to be transmitted as sacred books. And that brings us to the final question. Why does the Ethiopian Christian tradition preserve a wider memory of the world before the flood than most Western Bibles? The Ethiopian tradition does not preserve a different account of Noah inside the book of Genesis. Its distinctive contribution is that it continued to transmit two additional works, one, Enoch and Jubilees as scripture, alongside Genesis. Both works originated within ancient Judaism. Long before their surviving Ge'ez, manuscripts were copied in Ethiopia. Fragments of one Enoch, written in Aramaic, were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran. These fragments preserve portions of several sections of the Enochic collection and confirm that its traditions were circulating within Jewish communities before the rise of Christianity. Jubilees is also represented at Qumran by numerous Hebrew fragments. That evidence points to a Jewish origin during the Second Temple period, not an Ethiopian origin. Neither discovery produced a complete copy of either work. Parts of one Enoch also survived through Greek fragments and quotations, while portions of Jubilees remained in Greek, Latin, and Syriac transmission. But the complete surviving forms of both books were preserved in Ge'ez, the classical language of Ethiopian Christianity. That distinction is essential. Ethiopia did not create the Watchers, add them to Genesis, or invent a separate pre-flood history. Ethiopian scribes preserved ancient Jewish works that had become fragmented or disappeared in their complete forms elsewhere. The process took place through centuries of translation, copying, worship, and manuscript preservation. Scholars generally understand the Ge'ez versions to have been translated through earlier linguistic stages, with Greek playing an important role in their transmission. Within the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo tradition, one Enoch and Jubilees continued to be received as biblical books. In most other Christian traditions, they did not become part of the Old Testament canon, even though Enochic ideas remained known in early Christianity. The New Testament letter of Jude even contains language closely corresponding to 1 Enoch 1-9. That does not prove that every early Christian community accepted the whole Enochic collection as scripture. It does show that the tradition was neither unknown nor isolated from the world in which Christianity emerged. This is why the phrase Ethiopian Bible version must be used carefully. Genesis provides the shared foundation: the sons of God, the Nephilim, human wickedness, Noah, and the flood. First, Enoch expands the mystery through the Watchers, their teachings, their children, Enoch's mission, and their judgment. Jubilees retells the age within its own sacred chronology, bringing the rebellion of the Watchers into a broader account of creation, corruption, and covenant. Read together, these texts do not give us archaeological footage of the world before the flood. They give us several related ancient witnesses, each emphasizing different dimensions of the same moral crisis. And the value of that wider picture is not found in claims about lost machines, hidden civilizations, or truth suppressed by the West. Its value lies in the question that runs through the entire story. What happens when knowledge grows, power expands, and the responsibility to protect life is left behind? That is the question the world before the flood passes to the conclusion of this story. The world before the flood was not remembered as a world without human achievement. People built settlements, raised animals, created music, and worked metal. Human knowledge was expanding. But according to Genesis, violence was expanding with it. First, Enoch places that human crisis inside a wider story. The Watchers abandoned their appointed place, shared knowledge without responsibility, and produced children whose power brought further suffering to the earth. Jubilees retells the same age as a breakdown of the order intended for creation. These texts do not assign all responsibility to the Watchers. Cain had killed Abel before the Watchers descended. Lamech had already celebrated retaliation. Genesis makes clear that human choices remained central to the corruption of the earth. That may be the most important warning preserved in this story. Knowledge does not make a society righteous. Power does not teach those who possess it how to use it. And progress cannot protect a civilization that no longer places limits on violence, appetite, and pride. Yet the story does not end only with destruction. Noah's Ark carries human and animal life through the waters. Judgment brings one world to an end, but preservation makes another beginning possible. Ethiopian Christianity did not invent this wider pre-flood tradition. It preserved ancient Jewish books that allow modern readers to see how earlier communities wrestled with the mysteries surrounding Genesis 6. The rain ended the world before the flood. But the question that world leaves behind has never disappeared. Can human power grow without leaving wisdom, restraint, and responsibility behind? Which part of this ancient story should we explore next? The judgment of the Watchers, the mystery of the Nephilim, or what happened after Noah left the ark? Share your choice in the comments. And if you want to continue exploring the ancient texts preserved within the Ethiopian Bible, subscribe to the 81 Scrolls and join us for the next journey.